Rocking me up at it. We just passed a little ball of shiners, and that is exactly what we're looking for today. Smallmouth kind of roaming out in space, hanging around these humps. It's that time of the year. It's summertime. It's hot, hot, hot. And when it gets hot like that, those smallmouth, they get happy. It's that time where they start putting on the feed bag. Sometimes they can get a little pressured, you know, it's a pretty dang good one. They can get kind of pressured sometimes this time of year, you know, things get tough, especially when it's slick calm like this. Although they're hungry and they want to feed, there's times when it gets tough, and going to these ultra realistic, smaller presentations like we're doing here today, going after these minnow eaters, sometimes that is the deal. Come here. And that right there is what we're after. Big old smallmouth on the minnow bait right there. You can see he's got that thing gulleted. Could see a couple hanging off the edge of this break. I flipped over it. He just shot up at it. And that guy fell for it. Little minnow there. That is a blast. We're gonna get it back. So up in the North Country, a common theme across all these lakes that have smallmouth in them is they are just loaded with bait. Crayfish, perch. That's how these smallmouth get so big. And that's part of their aggressive natures. They're just constantly feeding. We're seeing shiners everywhere. I'm seeing it on Mega Live, seeing big bait balls off the side of these humps, off these points. We could see that a lot of these bait fish are up high, so that's what we're mimicking today, using these small minnow profile baits. I have a couple of them rigged up on the deck here with a variation of different head styles and a variation of different body styles, just to switch things up, get a different look. They all kind of have a time and place. These smallmouth, when they get on bait like this, they can get real nomadic. Sometimes, you know, they're out in space. We've seen it here in the past couple of years on Champlain. That's a big one that sticks out. A lot of events have been won targeting smallmouth out in 60, 70 feet, floating out in nowhere. And that's all because of the bait. They're just chasing that food source around. And that light jig head, that's super important for these fish that are up high, you know, right under the surface to 10 feet down, I'd say. It's really clear, so they know when they hear that bait hit the water, boom, they're trying to find it immediately. You can see it on Mega Live. They start tracking it. And that light head allows me to keep that bait up high, keep it above the smallmouth, and I can start to pull it away from them. It just triggers that feeding instinct. They have to go grab that thing. So that's what's nice with that lighter head and then that horizontal tie. I know that bait, it looks like it's darting up at the surface. Again, I can keep it up high, keep it above those smallmouth and make them chase it. That one, oh, it's a smallmouth. Not quite as big as that last one, but that's a solid one. Saw a couple of them just hanging out right off the edge of that hump, just like the last one. Oh, look at all the buddies with them. There's a pile of them there. Just a wee little guy. But yeah, that thing just fires them up, man. That was a little bit shallower one there. Again, that lighter head, I can just keep it up above them, keep them chasing that thing until they commit to it. Like I said, not a very big one. There's a ton of them with them. So we're gonna get him back here. On the other hand, when I start to see these deeper fish that are off the edges of these humps, out in 15 plus feet of water, that's when I'll go for a little bit heavier head. Anywhere from 1/4 all the way up to even 3/4 sometimes. The one that I have on here today on this other rod is 1/4, but with that line tie, one of the little bit heavier ones, that helps me keep that bait down there, and I can just barely twitch that bait in front of them, rather than pulling it up and away. If I have one where I'm trying to convince them, you know, a little bit deeper down, keeps that bait in front of their face, can sometimes help entice those fish that don't immediately want to commit to the bait. Gotta catch up to him. Little guy. Just saw him creeping along that break. on Mega Live there. Just barely twitching that thing. It's part to working this bait. It's real important, like I mentioned, keeping that bait above them, but then to really get them to commit to that thing, just barely twitching that rod. Sometimes, you know, he's just a little squeaky guy, we'll get him back. Sometimes it varies how they want, you know, that bait presented to them, and it's all just a matter of trying different things. Sometimes they just want it straight reeled. Sometimes they want it where you're really shaking that, popping that bait. But most of the time, you know, a good place to start when it comes to working that bait is, like I said, just barely popping that rod, almost popping slack in it. It's almost like a jerk bait, how you have to have some slack in your line to get good action out of it. It's the same thing with this bait. You can see at the end of my cast there, you can just watch that line just bounce on a little bit of slack. That's usually the name of the game and how you want that bait to work. It just barely gets that bait dancing, gets that tail shaking, and that's what really drives those fish nuts. And as far as the action of the rod goes, a medium light is usually what I go for. That soft tip is important when bouncing that bait. If you get too stiff of a rod, you're not going to get a good action out of the bait. That soft rod also allows those fish to eat it. You're going to have tight, constant connection to that bait, so you're going to feel that bite as soon as they latch on. And if you have too stiff of a rod, you're just going to yank that bait out. That soft rod allows them to get it for just a split second, so that every time they're getting it right in the top of the mouth, lets them eat that bait a little bit. And as far as the line goes, I like a little bit thinner braid. This is 8-pound braid. That thin line seems to really help with the action of the bait. So an 8-pound braid to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. And for the reel, I like a 2,500 to 3,000 size reel. Nothing too big. I like that compactness, especially when I'm, you know, moving and grooving, casting at a million fish. But that 25 to 3,000 size, the biggest thing is the drag. You know, these smallmouth, they're notorious fighters. They'll take crazy runs next to the boat. So a good drag system is really important when fighting these smallmouth. And another thing that we're seeing here today is not all these fish are biting right away. Like I said, sometimes when things get a little bit tough, you know, it's a game of just keeping moving, keeping on, finding new fish. So keeping the trolling motor on high, cast that one. If he doesn't bite immediately, you know, if it's not a giant one, I'm just gonna keep on moving. If I think it's a really big one, I might take a couple casts at him, but otherwise, if I take a cast and he doesn't bite right away, on to the next fish. So it's just a game of constantly keeping moving, trying to find new fish, active fish that are ready to bite. There we go. That's a decent one. Oh my gosh, he's got tons of buddies with him. Just cruising down that break. Gosh, look at that big one with him. Super clear water. They got a little smart on us, but when you can find them buddied up like that, they know it's game time. Usually when they see one going for it, they all gotta go for it. And that is when you can really put the hurting on the smallmouth. So much fun. Oh, here it comes. Gosh, and they are thick. These guys are eating up on those shiners, feeding up on the bait fish. So much fun. Chase them around using forward facing. Chase down these smallmouth. And that's what it gets you right there. Thick summertime smallmouth. Starting to put the feed bag on, chasing them with these different minnow baits. Oh my gosh, he is pinned. And that is a blast. Anytime that you can use your forward facing, chase after these smallmouth, sometimes you can find some fish that, you know, no one else is on. These smallmouth chasing bait, suspended. That is a blast. We're gonna get her back.